Welcome to the very first episode of the Baroo podcast, a modern lifestyle podcast for dogs and their people. I'm your host, Charlotte Bain. In this first episode, I chat with certified professional dog trainer, certified behavior consultant, author, and my mentor, Irith Bloom. We chat about something I think most pet parents are familiar with, and that is simply walking your dog. From some easy tips to help make the walk more enjoyable, to why letting your dog sniff on walks can be crucial in helping to raise a calmer canine. So let's jump in.
Hi, Charlotte. So good to see you.
So good to see you too. It's been too long since I've seen your face.
Yeah.
Do you want to introduce yourself to people that are listening?
Sure. So my name is Irith Bloom, which is not spelled like it sounds, but we'll leave that be. And I'm a certified professional dog trainer and certified behavior consultant. I'm also faculty at Victoria Stilwell Academy and DogBiz's Dog Walking Academy. I do a lot of presentations. I've done a bunch of podcasts, so this is really fun. I'm so excited about it.
Well, thank you.
I also do a lot of writing, and the most sort of notable thing I've written recently, I have co-authored a book with a couple of other really awesome trainers, two of whom also have a connection to Victoria Stilwell, by the way. One's a Victoria Stilwell Positively trainer, and the other one is a VSA graduate.
Oh, I didn't know.
And then there's a fourth author who's not directly related to Victoria, but she's still awesome. And our book is called Your Puppy and You, a step-by-step guide to raising a freaking awesome dog. And we just, we took more time than I should probably reveal to write this book and distill all of our knowledge about raising puppies, put it together in a really appealing, if I do say so myself, package. Right. I did not do the design. That is all the genius of my co-author, Maria.
The design. I love the title.
Thank you. And we've now spun that book off into a membership where people can come and get help raising their puppies step by step with no overwhelm. So you don't have to feel like you got to do all the things all at once, which is kind of what the internet tells you, right? The internet's Absolutely. Like, your dog is 14 weeks old and he does not know how to sit down, stay in his crate for 4 hours quietly and, whistle the Star-Spangled Banner. So you're doing something wrong. Like, that's what I feel like it's like.
Right.
So our puppy club, which depending on when you broadcast this, happens to have its doors open right now from March 14th to March 21st.
Awesome.
Or March 20th. Sorry, it's March 20th. We will be open. If you don't hear this between March 14th and March 20th, you can go check out our website, awesomedogproject.com, and get on the wait list for the next time the doors open. So we're here to help people with their puppies and help them raise them into freaking awesome dogs. And we're super excited about it.
I love that. I'm excited to take a peek at it. I have taken a peek at your book and it's amazing. You've been training dogs for a really long time.
Yes.
How did you get started?
I feel like this is probably the story that everybody tells. Like, I always liked animals as a kid, which is true. I did. I had gerbils and a snake who lived in different rooms, for the record. And I had, I rode horses and I had dogs. And when we got our first dog, my parents were super busy working really hard to give me all the things that I needed because they were fabulous parents.
Right.
And they were too busy to train the dog. So I basically took over training the dog. And when we went to obedience classes, I was the one holding the leash. And that was kind of how it started. And then, with horseback riding, I started learning about communicating with horses. And I just got really into animal training. And over the years, I turned into a total learning science geek. I don't have a degree in it. I wish I did. If I knew now what I knew then, I would have studied behavior in college instead of biology. But, this is sort of where my path took me. And I love it. I love talking about behavior. I love learning about how the brain works. And I love seeing animals learn and grow and expand their horizons.
Well, you are probably the most knowledgeable trainer that I know. And you have a gift for being able to talk to the people of the dog and conveying what needs to happen, what needs to be done in a kind, considerate way, which I appreciate. You're able to teach not just the dog, but you're able to teach everyone around you.
Well, thank you. That is such a lovely, lovely compliment. It really is.
Well, I wanted to talk about walks today, because I think everything from setting your dog up for success on a walk, tools, proper leash skills, sniffaris, which a lot of people probably don't know about.
Yes. And I love that term. I do not know who was the first person to say it.
It's like the best term.
It's like the best term. I was always like sniffy walks. And then someone came up with sniffari and I was like, or that. Right. That's the word. Well, there's so much in walks. I mean, let's just sort of start like unpacking it piece by piece. So let's pretend we're going in order. Okay. So I'm about to take my dog on a walk, right? Right. What do I want to do in advance to set my dog up for success on that walk? So obviously I need to train my dog how to walk on leash. Let's put that one aside for a minute because that's a big topic.
Right.
But
yes.
Smart things to do with your dog before you go on a walk is maybe do a little training session or have them hunt for some treats or something to just take a little of the edge off of their energy. Mm-hmm. So you're not going from, I've been cooped up in the house for the last 4 hours with nothing to do, and now we're going outside, yoo-hoo, and they're just not able to keep it in.
Giving them something to focus on, starting their noggin working a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah. And then giving them someplace to put just a little tiny bit of that energy and get them, like you said, get their noggin working.
Right.
And so I love that phrase, a little bit of training, like 5-10 minutes of, hey, touch my hands, sit, lie down, spin, let's go over here, go find that treat. I mean, like anything can really help to take the edge off the dog so that the dog's not going, I'm so excited, I can't even think straight. And then the other thing is you want to start with a dog who isn't bouncing off the walls when you pull out the leash and the harness.
Right.
And I do recommend you walk your dog in a harness. If your dog pulls, use a front clip harness to help keep yourself safe and reduce some of that pulling. But if the instant you pull the harness out, your dog is literally being like a pogo stick, going up and down and up and down. And I've had these client dogs. Right. You're not going to have a calm walk, right? Because you're already starting in like 3,000 miles per hour. And that's not where you want to start. So what I'll tend to do is I pick up the leash and the harness on and off all day. Just like, oh, look, it's a leash, put it down, so that we sort of uncouple that association. Oh boy, it's the leash. It's like, oh, you picked up the leash, but we didn't go anywhere. Mm-hmm. You picked up the leash, but we didn't go anywhere. You picked up the leash, but oh, hey, wait, maybe this time we will go. But they're a little calmer because they weren't anticipating it so much. And if they're still a little excited, you just make sure they give you a calm behavior, standing calmly while you harness them and leash them. And if they can't do that, you just wait patiently until they can.
Right.
Use food. It doesn't hurt. Throw some treats on the ground to give them something to think about other than, oh boy, you're putting on the harness. All of those things are going to get you out the door better. So we started with like something to turn their noggin on. I'm so stealing that phrase.
Yeah, I love
Charlotte, that's it. I'm stealing it. And I'm going to make sure they're calm while I'm putting the harness and the leash on. And then I'm going to make sure that they wait for permission before exiting the door. I don't want my arm and the dog to be out the door 5 seconds before the rest of me gets to follow.
Right.
So all of that stuff helps set you up for a good walk so that it's not so wild. So that's kind of like the pre stuff.
Right.
And then, like I said, I'm assuming you've already trained your dog to walk on leash in what I just said, but that's a whole other topic that we should probably get into.
We could get into that. And also using food has changed my walks completely. I've been able to redirect a lot of my dogs, and it takes time and it takes work. But redirect a lot of the dogs that I have that like to yell at other dogs who are walking by. And now they're able to focus on me versus I don't even have to carry the treat anymore. I still do because I'm a huge advocate for treating your dog and rewarding your dog, any chance that they do something that's you appreciate. But now they see another dog and they just look at me in general. And then
fabulous.
Sometimes I fake it. If I don't have the treat with me, I'll just, and I know that's not the nicest thing to do, but I'll just pretend I hold it. And after them, I'll give them a lot of praise if I don't have the treat readily available. So
yeah, and
they perform the behavior. Yeah.
And the dirty little secret of treat training is once in a while you won't have a treat on you.
Yeah,
and as long as it's only once in a while,
right,
you're cool. If you start tricking your dog 9 times out of 10, it will stop working.
They'll catch on pretty quick.
Yeah.
They're sorry cookies.
But a lot of times, especially when they've gotten really good at it, like I know the dogs that you work with do, that praise is really all they needed anyway, because they've learned what to do. The food got them the skill, but now they have the skill.
Yes. And it took some time for some of them, but I didn't give up. And that's the key. We just continued to do the behavior, even with any dog, even a friendly dog that would walk by, we would continue to do the behavior just so they knew to redirect towards me,
Yeah.
Something else to do. So we want to talk about the walking. The walk is so important for your dog for mental enrichment as well as physical enrichment and all sorts of different things. And it's not really on your schedule. There's going to be times when maybe you only have the time to give your dog a potty break, but they need so much more than that. So can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. This is so, like, I'm so obsessed with this topic. I can't even tell you. I think that this sort of forced march thing that for some reason has gotten into our cultural.
And that's what I was taught many moons ago. Yeah.
We all think that, the way the dog is supposed to walk is right next to our heel, and we march along and we go 2 miles in an hour, or we're a failure, or 1 mile and a half an hour, or whatever it is you're doing with your dog, or, a 1/4 mile and half an hour, but whatever it is, like you've got this set thing in your head. I have to get around the block. I have to go here. The dog must be next to me. And that is so non-productive for the dog. Like, you might get good exercise out of it, but your dog is like, but that was something I wanted to sniff, and I wanted to talk to that dog, and I wanted to see what this person is doing. And it's like, imagine that you're, in the doctor's office and there are all these magazines, and you don't really have anything to do because you're waiting for them. And every time you reach for a magazine, someone takes it away from you.
Right.
I think that's what it's like for our dogs. They're like, but that looked like an interesting article, and that one looked interesting too. And we don't let them read them. So I recommend that people walk for time, not distance. So basically, go at the pace of your dog. And I'll talk about a sort of hybrid way that we can go a little bit at our pace and a little bit at theirs in a minute. But you say, okay, I've got my dog out the door, sort of calm. I've got my food. We're imagining that we've already practiced basic leash walking. So the dog generally understands, stay within a certain range of me, which is for me what leash walking is about. Don't pull on the leash, not stand right next to me, but the leash should be loose.
Right.
So we walk along, they speed up, we speed up with them. They go and they sniff this bush that clearly, like, everybody in the neighborhood has peed on. They sniff it for 2.5 minutes, and we stand there. We're like, cool. Sniff the bush. Why not? It's all good. And then they're done with that. They're like, got all the smells, got the reports on all the neighborhood dogs, and let's keep going. And then they might really speed up to the next sniffy spot, which maybe is a fire hydrant or something like that. And you might find that walking like that, it's going to take you like 10 minutes to get half a block.
Right.
So if you only have 20 minutes for your walk, when you've done your 10 minutes, you just turn around and maybe cross the street and walk back so there's new and interesting smells. But don't worry about it's 20 minutes. I have to get around the block.
Right.
Let those 20 minutes be what your dog wants to make of them. Because dogs today, they live such unnatural lives. Like when I was a kid, back in the dark ages, dogs had a lot more freedom. We didn't have fences. We didn't have leash laws, at least not where I grew up. Dogs were allowed to kind of wander around and do their own thing. And Sometimes you didn't know if the dog was in the house or out of the house, and you didn't really worry about it.
My childhood dog, he just wandered all over the place.
Yeah.
And neighbors would call, or,
Yeah. They'd be like, the dog's on our doorstep again. And so they got to make choices and go out and explore what was interesting to them. And today what we've done is we've got them enclosed in little boxes where they don't have a lot of options, whether that box is a yard that they've sniffed, 20,000 times in the last week alone, or a house that doesn't even have any interesting new smells. This is their one opportunity to get out there and see interesting stuff. So let's let them do it at their pace. And all it costs us is the time. And the other really crazy thing about this is your dog's going to have so much more fun walking this way that they're going to be like, dude, Charlotte, or whatever the person's name is, you are awesome. They're going to be like high-fiving you after the walk. That was an awesome walk. Instead of being like, oh gosh, that was just awful. I didn't get to see what Marcy had peed on or what Fido had peed on. That was the most boring walk ever. So it's like the difference between going for a walk in the woods and being like stuck in an airport, Mm-hmm. So let's let our dogs have their fun sniffaris and get out there and enjoy the stuff. And then the crazy thing is when you do this, they pull on the leash less.
They do. Yeah.
Isn't it amazing?
Mm-hmm.
So
that would kind of leads me to my next question, which is kind of about dogs who walk poorly on the leash, and which is one of the reasons why my clients call me, because they are fed up or they're frustrated, or they haven't either implemented those proper leash skills in the beginning, or they just don't know how, or or they just don't know how to handle a situation because they haven't learned it yet, So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. What do you do, if you want to have this time with your dog? I mean, other than obviously hiring a certified professional dog trainer to help you with all of these things. What are some small steps do you think people can take to help alleviate some of the stress on a walk? Some quick tips.
Okay, so some of these are going to sound really weird, but I'm going to start with number one tip: bring food.
Yep.
Number one. Mm-hmm. Bring food. Your dog will know you have food because they have these amazing noses that we don't really harness. And if as you're walking out the door, you get them to wait at the door, they have a treat, then you walk out the door, get them to turn around and look at you for a second, hand them another treat. All of this reminds them, hey, my human has food. Exactly. And perhaps if I hang around here, I'll get more of it. And then anytime your dog just casually looks up at you, which they do, and if you get off your phone, you will notice when your dog looks up at you. I'm not looking at you, Charlotte. I'm looking at all the people I see in our neighborhood. Get off your phone, look at your dog, and you're going to see that your dog looks up at you. They're like, hey, that was fun, or whatever it was. Be like, Fifi, I love you so much. Have a treat.
Right.
And all this is reminding Fifi that you have food. Plus, dogs want connection, right? They're social animals, and we are co-evolved with dogs. At least that's what the science suggests, is that we've literally evolved to be together. We've evolved together moving forward from a certain point in our history. So dogs want to connect with us. So when they look up at us and we're like, yeah, cool, so happy to be sharing this walk experience with you, they're going to be like, hey, this is fun. We're sharing the experience.
Right.
Where I think what happens a lot of the time is there's no food, there's not a lot of connection because we're sort of on a schedule and we're worried about getting to a certain place and we're all stuck in our own head, and the dogs can feel that. And since we're disconnected from them,
absolutely, they
disconnect from us. So I know that sounds weird,
you're right.
Yeah.
Just be in the moment with your dog. Even if it's only 10 minutes, it's a 10-minute walk. Just try to be in that moment with your dog as much as you possibly can.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I have a lot of people who say, oh, my dog's not treat motivated or food motivated, but you can find something that works, whether it's a piece of chicken or a hot dog or their favorite toy or something like that guarantee your dog is motivated by something, whether it's, certainly steak or
and yeah, so like really, really, really good food or their favorite toy. And I do find sometimes the dogs who are really anxious outdoors, but have a good, strong bond with you. Sometimes you just reaching down and petting them or praising them. They can't handle the food in that moment, but they feel strong enough connection with you that you saying, hey, Fifi, I got you. I don't know why this has turned into Fifi's show, but it's the Fifi show. So, hey, Fifi, I gotcha. They'll, feel more comfortable because they know that you're there with them. And again, you're building that connection.
Right.
And that's not going to necessarily solve all your problems, but it's definitely going to help.
Yeah.
And then another tip I'll give you is if your dog, like they just pull kind of no matter what you do, make your walks really repetitive, which is going to be really boring for you in the beginning. But like you walk out the front door, walk to the sidewalk, and feed the dog treats as you're walking. So, you walked out the door, got Fifi to turn around and look at you. You gave Fifi a treat. Then you take another couple steps. You say, hey, Fifi, I'm still here. And you hand her a treat. And she's not pulling yet, right? But when she gets to the point where you say, hey, Fifi, and she's like, I'm sorry, I'm checked out. That thing over there is super exciting. Then you just turn around, walk back towards the front door and just keep practicing up and down your walk. And before you know it, you'll be able to turn and start walking in another direction. And then at some point, the dog starts pulling again, walk back to the house and back out to that spot and back to the house. And you can slowly stretch the amount of distance you can get with the dog walking nicely beside you. Now, it does help if you practice leash walking indoors where it's boring and easy for your dog first.
Not a lot of things like squirrels and dogs and cars and trucks and all sorts of things.
Yes, scooters and
bicyclists. Oh,
yes.
Still to this day have somebody who just cannot handle a bicyclist when a bicycle goes by.
Yeah. And I think for some dogs, the trigger is just so strong. And then you kind of ride it out and say, hopefully there won't be another bicycle in the next 2 minutes.
And it's also kind of, I think, up to us to try to, anticipate that moment. So we see the bicycle. I mean, obviously sometimes somebody comes from behind or whatever, and, but you see the bicycle coming and, you either move the other direction or move aside or do it.
Yeah. You kind of, you prepare and you give the dog a little more distance.
Right. You
definitely.
A little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That does help. It does help, and I don't want everyone to think like it's going to be instant. Oh, I'm going to do like these one or two things and my whole walk is going to be transformed. But as Charlotte said, sometimes they're like, I won't take food. But if you just keep offering them food, a week later, they're like, dude, this is awesome. Chicken on my walk. Mm-hmm. And I have no idea how they got from I won't take food to now I'll take chicken. I almost feel like it's water wearing through a stone. They just need time to get used to the idea. And then they're cool with it.
Yeah.
So something that I think can be really fun. So let's talk for a second about how you train your dog to walk on leash indoors. Just super basic, simple. Basically, grab some treats, put your dog on a leash, take a step in any direction. As soon as your dog looks at you or takes a step in your direction, praise them, hand them a treat, then take another step.
Right.
Repeat. The dog will start to follow you around as you walk around with the leash on. And then you slowly say, okay, now you don't need to get a treat every single step. Maybe it's every couple of steps, and you work up to your walking all around your home, which depending on where you live could be very small or very large.
Right.
And then you try it outdoors. But when you go back outdoors, you go back to one treat for every step.
Right.
And then you build in all these other things we've been talking about the whole time. But if you really want to supercharge it, what I love to do is I teach dogs two alternating signals. Right. I use the words with me and go sniff. And I don't care what words you use. You could say, kombucha and pelican, as long as you remember what it means. To your dog, it doesn't matter. But for me, with me and go sniff come out of my mouth naturally. So that's what I say. So with me means walk nicely next to me and I will feed you treats for staying within leash distance.
Right.
That's what with me means. You don't need to be right at heel position, but as long as you're staying with a loose leash, I'm going to be like, good job, Fifi, have a treat every few steps or so. Go sniff means now it is your walk and you get to decide what we're going to do. And so what this would look like sort of in practical terms is maybe when I walk out the door, I say, with me, and then I do a few praise, treat, praise, treat, praise, treat. Then I get to a particularly sniffy spot and I say, Fifi, go sniff. And then I follow Fifi to this sniffy spot and I let Fifi sniff for as long as Fifi wants to sniff. And eventually what usually happens is Fifi will look up at me and say, well, I'm done with the sniffy spot. And when Fifi looks up at me, that's her telling me I'm ready to do more with me walking.
Right.
And then I say with me and we walk for a little bit. I look for a sniffy spot. I say, go sniff. If I say go sniff and Fifi's like, not interested, then we stay in with me mode. Okay. But I say with me once and feed, go sniff once and let the dog lead. And it's like when I need to lead the walk, I go back to with me. And when I'm fine letting the dog decide the pace and where we're going, I say go sniff. So for instance, Charlotte and I both live in the urban wasteland, which is West Los Angeles. I do not say go sniff while I'm crossing Wilshire Boulevard.
Right.
You know, that's just not something I would do.
That would not be a good scene. Yeah.
No. So that's a with me situation. We're crossing the street. I need you to like keep up a certain pace. The traffic light is green. Let's go.
That's usually what I say when we're I'll be like, let's go. And then everybody, gets okay. Like really excited. And we trot across. For those of you who don't know, Wilshire Boulevard is a very busy street in Los Angeles.
Yeah. It's like 6 lanes wide. Yeah. So there is much scope for bad things if you stop in the middle of it. We'll put it that way. And the great thing about this, because people are always like, oh, the dog's always going to want to just be in go sniff mode. And actually that's not true. Because we say you can sniff and I'm going to let you, then it stops being like the forbidden fruit of the dog's world. Right. And they're like, no, but walking next to you, I get this yummy chicken, which is kind of awesome. So what I find is that for most dogs, when I use with me and go sniff, not only do they stop pulling on the leash as much, but they tend to want to be in with me mode more and more and more. And then some days they're going to be like, no, today I really need a full on like 90% Sniffarri. But most days they'll be happy to divvy it up with you, sort of half and half.
And we also want to be cautious though, that I was just thinking not to let them sniff things that might be undesirable. They could like put their schnoz on something or put something in their mouth, such as like again, like where Charlotte and I were in the same general neighborhood, like there are work personnel, whatever the right word is, who live things like chicken bones. They leave chicken bones. Your worst nightmare. Yeah.
Yeah. So for that, we also want to teach ideally like a solid sort of mine, not yours, kind of like, let's turn away from that. But if you have a dog who's already programmed to look at you a lot, then it's going to be easier for them to turn away from that chicken bone that you don't want them to eat.
That's also goes into being mindful and being in the moment. So you're there, not on your phone, so you can catch it when your dog actually does something like that, which is a totally normal dog behavior. They're not technically doing anything wrong. They're just, unfortunately, might be picking up something that's not so good for them. So
yeah, you don't want them picking up like broken glass or cooked chicken bones or things rat like poison. That. Gotcha. Yeah. There is rat poison around too. So definitely keeping an eye out is important. But then that's the other thing is if we're mindful and we're paying attention during our walk, we learn which parts of the walk are safe and which parts of the walk might have hazards.
Right. Do you ever come across people who are like, I'm giving too much food, too many treats to my dog. It's too much. Like, I don't understand. My dog's just going to want treats. They're not working for me. They're just working for the treats and, all that stuff. And how do you approach that with your clients?
Well, I have to admit, I hear that all the time.
Yeah.
And so there's a few things. Number one, we are asking dogs to do things that aren't the natural thing they want to do. So I'll make the really sort of well-worn analogy of if you walked into your job tomorrow and your boss was like, Charlotte, you're doing such a great job. I'm going to stop paying you.
Right.
how would you react to that? Right? Like, what? So when we say like, when can I stop feeding my dog treats? It's like saying, when can I stop getting paid for my job?
Right.
Now, we may not need to get a paycheck every single day, to take the human analogy. Like we can thin out the paycheck rate to like once every 2 weeks, right? So in dog terms, maybe that's in the beginning, I get a treat every step. But then as I get better and better at this, I get a treat once a block.
Right.
So you can reduce the number, but it's nice to keep the food available, like Charlotte said, for when like the dog does something really awesome or there's a really difficult situation. It's nice to have the food to rely on. And maybe you find that you don't even need it after a few weeks or maybe months of practice, but it's nice to have it just in case.
Just in case.
Yeah. And so what I usually say is if you're kind of naturally going to feed fewer and fewer treats. And so over time, you won't be giving 100 treats on a walk. You'll be giving 5.
Right.
And if you're worried that your dog is getting fat because they're getting 100 treats on a walk, which is a completely reasonable thing to worry about, then you just cut back on their food a little bit, or take some of their, if you're feeding them like a good quality dry dog food, like a kibble, mix the kibble in with something smelly that's a good treat, and you give them kibble some of the time and a treat some of the time, and they work for their meal.
Right. We want to get into walking tools like choke collars and stuff like that. Do you want to talk about some?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that.
Not super.
Yeah.
Okay. So why don't we talk about what you were a big fan of the body harness. I remember you taught me to use the Freedom no pull harness, and that's really been great for most of my clients. So we can talk about that and why you avoid certain other things like choke collars and whatnot.
Okay. So let's just start with like simple health concerns.
Okay.
The dog's neck is an incredibly important part of their body.
Right.
So where collars hit, among other things, there's a thyroid gland that can be damaged with repeated pressure. There's a lot of little soft tissue areas. And let's not forget, the neck is part of the spine.
Right.
So if you're constantly putting pressure on a dog's neck, you're putting pressure on their spine. And just like we humans can have neck pain and back pain and all of that, if your dog is constantly carrying their neck in a weird position, that is going to start creating pain for them. And dogs who are in pain are more likely to be stressed out and overreact about stuff.
Yes.
Because they're hurting. Think about how you feel when you're sick or hurting. You're more likely to lash out, right? So that's one thing. And that's for any collar in the world. And I know you might say, but my dog doesn't pull. But, maybe they don't pull 98% of the time. But once in a while, you zig and they zag because the communication wasn't there. And now they're being jerked by the neck to a different place. Or they suddenly get really excited about something and they pull forward and you weren't expecting it. Or like I have a friend whose dog used to pull backwards. She'd be like, no, we're going too fast.
I have some of those. And they put the brakes on, they pancake, like while we're just walking, and all of a sudden they'll stop suddenly, or they'll stop suddenly and want to go a different direction, but they're like crazy strong. And And then all of that pressure, especially if they're pulling backwards away from you, right? All that pressure is on their spine.
Mm-hmm. So we don't want to do that. That's just like straight health reasons. And then specifically when we start talking, and I'm going to call out a body harness that I do not like. Okay. Because there's also a body harness out there that I really don't like. Anything that is designed to cause pain to work. And I'm just going to say right now, the manufacturers will tell you it's a gentle correction. Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to tell you right now, there's no such thing as a gentle correction.
Right.
If it was enough of a correction, I'm putting quotation marks in the air for everyone. If it was enough of a correction that the dog stopped doing what they were doing, it must have been uncomfortable or painful, right?
Right. Yeah.
So any tool that causes discomfort or pain is going to make the dog feel uncomfortable about the situation.
Right.
So imagine your dog is super excited because Fifi's best friend Fido is across the street and she's trying to lunge over to see Fido, and the collar is like these prong collars. It's like, jabbing into her. She's going to start thinking, wow, when I see Fido, pain happens. Maybe Fido's not my best friend after all.
Right.
And she's going to get uncomfortable about that situation. And suddenly the lunging, which used to be, oh my gosh, I want to see my friend, is going to turn into get away from me because when you're around, I'm in pain. And that applies with prong collars. That applies with choke chains. That applies with these plastic prong collars that you'll sometimes see.
Yeah,
anything that essentially is designed to put pressure on the dog and cause pain in the neck.
Mm-hmm.
Even a flat collar can cause pain. This goes back to the let's protect the poor sensitive neck. It's just not a good scene. It's not the message you want. You want your dog to say, walks are fun and life is good when I'm out here and I get food from my person and we have a fun time and I get to sniff. Not any second now that pain could happen again. That's not what I want my dog to be thinking. And I'm going to say this right now. Most body harnesses are fine. Some of them limit the dog's motion more than others. You can look into that. I'm just going to say the balance harness specifically is designed not to limit motion.
Right.
But, there's a limit. There's a limitation built into having a harness on.
Right.
But the one harness that I'm aware of that is specifically designed to cause pain to make the dog stop because it cinches around their side. It tightens around them is the sporn harness. So I would never recommend the sporn because I've seen dogs run away from it because it causes them so much pain.
Yeah, and that's a key. If your dog is running away from, the tools that you're using, most of the time that's the key that, either when you're putting either it's uncomfortable when you're putting it on them. I do have some dogs who somewhere along the line, someone may have been a little too rough when they put on the harness, or that was the dog's interpretation. And so they run away from the harness, every time, even though the result is a walk. So somewhere it got roughed up a little bit, perhaps. So listen to your dog.
Yeah. That should be our theme. Listen to your dog.
Listen to your dog or tune into your dog.
Yeah.
I wanted to circle back really quickly because you mentioned with the prong collar on, your dog was being reactive to, their best friend. And then they learned that by doing that, they may have learned that their, best friend wasn't such a good, fun thing after all. But I think you said, reacting to their best friend. But I want to go through the difference between reacting, like a reactive dog and an aggressive dog. I have a lot of clients who are like, my dog is so aggressive on leash, and I try to be like, well, I think he's just reacting maybe to the situation. Your dog is not necessarily an aggressive dog, and walks are not making your dog aggressive. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, this is such a great point. And I'm just going to say, for me, I try really hard to use the word overreactive.
Right.
Because in fairness, we react to stuff, right? If I hear a horn honk next to me, I'm probably going to turn my head and look.
Right.
That's fine. I'm reacting.
Mm-hmm.
What's not fine is if then I start screaming at the person and run over and beat their car with a baseball bat or something, right? That would be overreacting.
Yes.
So I think that sometimes our dogs who overreact and who we call reactive, so we'll just use that word, a lot of times they're just super excited. They don't know what to do. They're like, oh, it's a dog. I want to see it. Oh, it's a child. I want to smell it. Oh, it's a squirrel. I want to chase it. And it's not, I hate that thing.
Right.
It's not, I'm angry about that thing. It's, I am so excited that my brain has left my body.
Right.
And I'm just lunging and barking and jumping around because I'm not thinking straight anymore because my excitement is too high. And that, by the way, for the record, that is how the brain works. You get above a certain level of stress or excitement and you're not thinking with the rational part of your brain anymore. You're reacting with the more primitive part of your brain.
Like a panic attack kind of.
Yeah. It's not, so you're not making conscious, rational decisions. You're just like, oh, my instinct is to jump around. So I'll jump around. And that's what our dogs do. But so a lot of dogs have this sort of reactivity where they're like, oh my gosh, I'm on leash and I want to run over there, but I can't. And so then this energy doesn't have a place to go. And so they're jumping around and they're jerking the leash and lunging and all of these things that they do. But if they do that too often and there's pain associated with that, then sometimes they can start to learn, oh gosh, when I see a scooter, like let's take a scooter, let's make it an inanimate object. I see it. Well, I mean, there's a person on it, but still I see a scooter go by and I'm really excited because it's moving and I kind of want to chase it. That's not aggression. Chasing is not aggression. Chasing is just chasing. I want to catch up to it and see what it is. And, maybe grab it depending on what the dog's personality is, but you don't let them. And then you've got this prong collar on. And what happens is
every time.
Yep. And ouch, ouch, ouch. And then they start to say, scooters lead to pain. Therefore, I want the scooter to be far away. Mm-hmm. And a good way to think of aggression is any behavior that an animal does to get more distance.
Okay.
In behavior science, we call it distance increasing behavior. You want the behavior increases distance, but there's more than one kind of distance increasing behavior. Fearful behavior is one, aggressive behavior is the other. Right. So what happens is it stops being, I'm so excited, I want to chase down that scooter, and starts being, I'm so anxious and stressed and nervous, I want to make that scooter go away. Right. And that's where it turns into aggression. And what you see with a lot of dogs is that they have these aggressive behaviors where they really are trying to create more distance. Get away from me. Go away. Go away. Go away. They're yelling at whatever it is. And initially, they didn't feel that way about it. Or if you take them off leash, they don't do it at all. Mm-mm. Because the leash is wrapped up in the situation. I'm trapped, my neck hurts, or whatever it is.
Right.
And even if the leash isn't attached to the neck, even if the leash is attached to a nice, well-fitted harness, you can still see this because there's frustration about not being able to move where they want.
Right.
And that frustration, as they get more and more aggravated, can tip into aggression.
Right.
So aggression is, I want you to go away. And most reactivity, which is these overreactions, is I'm so excited, I don't know what to do. So it's a really different emotional space for the dog. Does that kind of answer that question? I hope
it does answer that question. And talk a little bit about emotions in dogs. Because
yeah,
I feel like, we all know that dogs are sentient beings, but that drives most of what they do. They're emotional, just like us.
Yeah. And I think, it's funny that you say we all know that dogs are sentient beings. I think there are people out there who will say, no, they're not. And I think they're a little behind the curve on the science.
Sure.
But what we've learned, let's say there's more than one scientific theory out there, but one that is very strongly supported by evidence, which was created by a researcher named Jaak Panksepp, who unfortunately passed away a few years ago, is that all mammals share a set of basic emotions.
Okay.
And those emotions include like a bonding emotion. There's a sort of separation and grief emotion. There's a panic emotion. There's anger, which I think he actually calls rage. There's curiosity, seeking is one of the basic emotions, even though we don't often think of that as an emotion.
Interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't think of that as an emotion.
Yeah. And then the bonding one obviously is sort of like a love emotion. And then there's joy. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the experiences we have emotionally, dogs do too. And maybe they don't give it a name in their mind. I have no idea how they process things in their brain. I wish I knew. But what I do know is that when they see a familiar person, the bonding part of their emotional circuitry lights up. Mm-hmm. And when they, if the person leaves and they're dogs who have separation anxiety, they go into more of a panic mode. Right. So if you're panicking, let's take this as a really good example of being driven by your emotions. You're not going to be thinking rationally, right? So when you're having a deeply profound sense of panic, you're not going to make smart choices. And And it's hard for a dog to make smart choices when they're panicking. And it's hard to make smart choices when you're overexcited. So a lot of the, I'm putting air quotes again, misbehavior we see is about being so emotional that you can't make a conscious, rational sort of decision, whatever that looks like for a dog. But they do have rational decisions. Like when you ask them to sit and then they sit because they know you're going to give them a treat. That's rational, right? As opposed to you say sit and they don't sit because they're so freaked out. And then you're angry at them. You're like, they're disobeying me. But what's actually happened is their brain has checked out. The part of their brain that thinks well has checked out and the emotions have taken over and they can't think straight. So most of the time when our dogs are doing something that makes us nuts, it's because they're too emotional about that situation, or they're experiencing an emotion that maybe isn't the ideal emotion for that situation. So I will say it is well worth the time to teach your dog how to calm themselves down.
Right.
And you don't do that by yelling at them any more than that's going to help you calm down, right? If you're anxious and someone says to you, calm down, it's not going to make you calm down. It's just going to make you more anxious.
Yes.
So, we can teach dogs to be calmer, but I want you all to remember when your dog is like, it just seems like their brain has checked out. They are probably being over emotional and their brain has checked out, and they don't have a choice in that any more than we do when we're in a situation that totally stresses us out and triggers a strong emotion.
Right. That makes sense. Well, we've been talking for some time now. Anything else you want to cover?
Yeah, I will. I guess what I'll say is one of the things that I've learned over the years is like, this is almost sort of a thought to carry forward with you. Let's call it a thought to carry forward with you. Is if you listen to your dog, if you pay attention and watch them, they're not going to talk to you. They're going to talk to you with their body language. Like 99.9% of the communication that dogs give us is body language. And if you start listening and paying attention to that body language, you're going to start realizing your dog is telling you a lot. Like, hey, I'd rather you not pet me right now. Or, hey, I'm really excited about this walk. Or, hey, I need a little help here. I'm feeling a little panicked. All of those things, they're saying those things to us. And if we can start saying, you know what, I'm listening, then they're going to feel calmer. Because what they feel like, some of them now, is I'm shouting and nobody can hear me. And that's just going to make them feel more and more stressed and more emotional and more panicked. Right. So if there's any one thought you walk away from this with, it's listen to your dog, which can mean watch your dog and, all kinds of other things, but pay attention to your dog. Right. And the other thing is when you let dogs make their own choices, like you take them on that Sniffarri and you put them in go sniff mode and you let them sniff around and go at their own pace, that reduces stress. Right. And almost all behavior that we humans get really annoyed by in dogs is stress related. Yes. So anything you can do to reduce the stress in your dog is going to make your dog easier to live with.
That's great. Thank you, Irith.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Well, I really, really, really appreciate you taking the time to talk.
Yeah, so much fun. Thank you.
I'll probably hit you up for many more.
Great. Love it.
We'll talk soon. Let's have drinks. There you have it, you guys. The very first episode of the Baroo podcast. If you want to learn more about my guest, Irith Bloom, I've included links in the show notes to her website and to her new book, Your Puppy and You, a step-by-step guide to raising a freaking awesome dog. And if you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to rate and follow the Baroo podcast. Thank you so much for joining me, and let's chat next week.